Hi, welcome to Fictional Narrative. I'm Neri, and it is Cozy Saturday. Cozy Saturday is a series where I review the latest cozy mystery that I've newly delved into. I give a non-spoilery review, followed by the rating and a warning, and then the spoiler review. So if that's something you're interested in, please keep watching. Today we are reviewing Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. This is a novel by Jessie Q. Sutanto, who is also the author of Dial A for Aunties and that whole series, which I have on my bookshelf, but I haven't read. Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers is something that I borrowed from my library, and they were like, hey, you've had this on hold for a while. It's here. You got to read it because there's like a huge long list of people who want to read this book. And I was like, okay, I have to put all of my reading plans on hold. I have to read this book. So here we are, right? So Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers is about a 61-year-old widow who is living alone, and one day she finds a dead body in her tea shop, and she is determined to do a better job than the police ever could. So I'm like, okay, let's see what I'm up against. There are a lot of positives to this book. First of all, with the exception of Vera, just because of her personality, pretty much every other character is extremely lovable. Although all the characters that we get to know in this story is the murder suspect. Everybody's a murder suspect, essentially. And of course, because Vera's like 61, she's a widow, she is not living with her son. She's kind of lacked a lot of like excitement in her life and being alone after so many years of raising a family. It's been pretty tough on her. And her tea shop isn't doing so well. We find that basically right off the bat. The setting is so concise, even though it's like set in a city. I, as a reader, don't feel overwhelmed at all. So that's really great. Every single character that comes through Vera's shop and ends up being someone that she suspects and investigate has a really great and enduring background story, which pulls it together because this plot could not move on its own. It needed the characters to be a substance, and that is definitely something that I view as a positive, especially with a lot of cozy mysteries, because you could very much just be like, if the cops say it is or it isn't or they got it, you don't need to be a part of it. Vera does not need to be a part of this. But of course, Vera, being as bored as she is, gets into shenanigans, and now she's a part of it. The few things that I found kind of jarring about this particular book is that the personality of Vera herself is like, it's not like she's not without flaws, and she talks about this at the very beginning of her story, but her flaws are more like very positive things to her. And so we get a character that ends up kind of not having these boundaries, believing that she knows more than the police, knows more than her son, who is a lawyer, knows more than anybody. And somehow it works for her, but as someone who grew up with the whole respect flows one way type of upbringing, family, culturally, and the boundaries that Vera crosses, although works for her, it also works for her in that, like, oh, she's a little old lady, what could she do? Which, if you've watched other videos in the series, the old people can do a lot. They do a lot of damage, okay? Vera's just not one of them, but essentially, because of this persona, she's endearing to everybody around her. But as a reader, I was like, run. Run like her son did. Run. Yeah, and I'm saying like that's not even like a spoilery thing because we learn it. We learn it like straight off in like the first chapter. She tells us what it is, and she tells us, well, her traits are positive because they're coming from a place of good intentions and things like that. You know, I'm firm in the belief that intentions are not enough when the results are hurtful. So it was a kind of semi-triggering thing for me. So that I will say, if you maybe come from a similar background or your culture kind of has this like respect flows one way type of thing, this may not be for you. That being said, the mystery itself, it verges into romance in a way that is like, this could be a romance novel, this could be a rom-com, and this could be a mystery at the same time, and it's done so well tied together. It's really great. But because rom-coms are sometimes kind of just convenient, some of the conflicts and then the resolutions are convenient in a way that I don't even know how it turned out to be. Like, okay, how do certain characters get away with what they do? I don't know. It just didn't seem realistic, but at the same time, all the characters are so endearing. I want them to have that happy ending. As far as I know, this seems to be a one-off story. If it isn't, I don't know if I'll pick it up again. I think I've had enough of Vera. But again, great story. It just wasn't for me. This is going to be a 4 out of 5 stars for me, actually, because I think that there were so many things about it that are really great. And if I didn't feel so uncomfortable as a reader because of my bias and my background, I think maybe I would have enjoyed it. Although if you are not a fan of sleuths that, because they're taking things into their own hands, kind of take certain liberties that you're like, you shouldn't have done that, this one might make you a little upset. Not enough to throw the book at the wall, but maybe a little upset. Alright, that being said, we are now going to move into our spoilery review. So this has been your warning. I don't do that. I don't know why I did that. I'm sorry. Here we go. First of all, the police did not think it was a murder. Okay, Vera is just like on it about, like, she's like, it must be a murder. It must be a murder. Why? Because she found him holding a USB. But why didn't the cops find him holding a USB, the dead body? Why wasn't he holding a USB? That would have been suspicious. I just had to get that off my chest. It bothered me so much throughout the whole freaking book. And it's like, immediately when she gets a moment alone, you find out that she's done this. Never mind that she may or may not have, like, tampered with the crime scene. She's like, I didn't touch the body. Which, Vera, you want me to believe that when you took something out of the dead man's hand? Anyway, her son's a lawyer. He's like, Mom, what did you do? She's like, no, I'm just talking hypothetically. I didn't do anything. He's like, you better not have done anything. You better not have done anything. Mind you, I understand needing your independence, but I also think that when you have a mother who is widowed and living alone, maybe you could spare some time, I guess. But more than that, it's like Vera, in trying to solve this murder, ends up with her own, like, found family who has the time for her versus her son, who is still working to build his career and who is probably doesn't have that time. He should make time, but the time that he can make is probably limited if he wants to be a big city lawyer, which, according to her, it seems like that's the route he is trying to take. Now, this dead man, I can understand why everybody wants him dead. I don't understand how his last day of life, he went through so much, and the people who put him through so much don't really face any consequences. And I will say, I did not really suspect who the murderer was until the end, and I felt so sad for him. And he's a murderer. I don't want to feel sad for a murderer, but honestly, I like the murderer more than the victim. And he's the one that, of course, doesn't get away with it, because you can't, well, you shouldn't get away with murder, but we can't let it pass just one time. The murderer is so sweet. Okay. I know that sounds really, really weird. I will say, though, that the way that Vera doesn't have any boundaries and she's mingling with this pool of, to her, suspects, not so much to the police being suspects, because the police don't think that there is a murder. She ends up being like not only this matchmaker, but this little catalyst to allow healing in relationships, even relationships with a mother and daughter within the story who aren't even healing from really wounds that they're inflicting on themselves. But the victim's wife is who I'm talking about, and his daughter. He was so terrible to his wife that those nerves rolled off of her, and of course children detect these things. And I like that addition in the book where it was subtle. It was like behavior, it was how shy the daughter was, how she doesn't want to interact with people, and how Vera helped unwind this so that they could have not just a close relationship but a healthy relationship. And there are so many reasons in this book, and the reason why it was so uncomfortable for me was like she's doing all this good with her violation and lack thereof of boundaries, that it almost excuses that lack of boundaries when it really shouldn't. And I'm glad that the characters stand up for themselves when they should. But of course, the one thing that I'm lacking is her own relationship with her son. I'm not asking for it to get fixed, but they don't even really have a conversation. She like has her found family now. The son is part of it, but it's very much like, well, okay, you go off and do your city things. I have people who I can spend my time with, so I know you're there. It's like now she's like, and there's obviously a lot of baggage and things that they should talk about. And it's not like the son is uncaring of his mother. At one point, he's like, oh, you closed the shop? That's good. I've been waiting for you to do that, like, because you're getting older. He tries to convince her to move in with him, even like, look, I'll take care of you. It doesn't seem like he wasn't ready to do those things, but he's not a pusher, and their relationship is contentious. There's a lot of stuff that is relationships in this book, but it's done so absolutely well. I actually really liked the mystery. There was a good payoff. I'm just very sad about it. But outside of that, I feel like a sum total, maybe 2-3 complaints. This was a really good book. I'm gonna need to not read Dial A for Aunties for a really long time, and it's been sitting on my shelf, but if the boundaries are as like invisible to the aunties as they are to Vera, I'm gonna need to find my peace first before it is shattered. I guess it's like the Barbie movie. I haven't watched it. My best friend watched it, and she was like, the way that it ends, I guess you haven't watched the Barbie movie, but she said, I guess this is spoilers for that too. Again, I haven't watched it, but she's like, the way that it is and the way that it is explained is like a woman's legacy type of thing. daughter to mother, women telling women's stories, etc., etc., and sort of a positive build of something like that, of paving the way. But me and my bestie coming from mama trauma households, I don't know that that would click. I still need to see that movie. I still want to see Barbie because it's Barbie. But I don't know that the message would hit home to me as much as someone who has more of a positive thing, or a positive women in their life, like older women that they were able to look up to. It's just one of those things, right? Maybe if you haven't gone through the trauma and the how uncomfortable it is and how powerless it is to be in that kind of relationship where respect only flows one way, then maybe you can enjoy this book without that feeling of uncomfortability. And I definitely recommend it. And for those who are not comfortable with it, of course, your peace comes first. But if you're ever feeling adventurous, I still recommend it. So that's it. If you've watched this far, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Bye!